You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma podcast. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today. But before we do, I've got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is the Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma. And it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. So a huge shout out to Governor Anatoby for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. Our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. And now, let's get into today's episode. I think we'll just dive straight in. Not many people probably know this, but how'd you guys meet?
Oh, that's your story, not mine. I was there.
I had my parents had moved to Houston, and I finished my first year of law school, and I went down to work, there was a friend of a friend who lived at Three Fountains Apartments, which was where all the young singles hung out. And we one Saturday afternoon, and we were having a few beers and playing guitar and having a good time. And this girl showed up with a orange muumuu on. It's prescient in a way. An orange muumuu on and a towel around her head. And so later I called Tom, who I was visiting, and I said, who's that girl with the towel on her head with the orange muumuu? And he said, well, that's Ann Whiting. And I said, well, is she dating anybody? He said, yeah, I think she dates this guy that plays for the Oilers, but I don't think it's that serious. And so anyway, I called, and
You had a question, didn't you?
Yeah, that was the other thing. I wanted to know how big she was. Because in an orange muumuu, you really can't tell.
How big she was.
Yeah. So that was kind of pretty shallow of me. But anyway, I asked it, and he said, oh, no, you'll like her figure just fine. So anyway, I asked her out, and we dated that summer and ended up getting engaged the following December, I guess. It was 1968.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was 4 years ago, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So I'll say we married a year to the day from when we met. And also, I always tell people we met because of OSU. Uh-huh. So we've been connected with OSU since the minute we met.
Yeah, because Ann's a University of Texas graduate in math and Latin, and and all my family were University of Texas people, but we had moved around so much. When we moved to Oklahoma when I was in high school, and I just didn't want to start over again. So I asked my dad, I said, I'd like to go to Oklahoma State. He said, well, thank goodness it's not OU.
Yeah.
Because he's a Texas.
Right, of course. Yeah. Which obviously you did go to OU Law in the end.
Yeah, I did.
But initially.
But marrying a UT grad got me back in the will.
Yeah. Somebody had to go to UT, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So is this, when you meet, this is before you go to OSU, and then you both go to OSU together, or after?
No. This was after I'd finished at OSU and finished my first year of law school.
Yeah. So when you guys meet, then, back up a little bit. Why did you want to go to OSU?
I had friends from school, and I also had a girlfriend who was going to OSU.
Yeah. Okay.
And a very nice person, and you know how that goes. Those things last about 3 months.
Yeah, you're right. A little into that. I had exactly the same experience. I had a girlfriend before I went to university, and then 3 months later, I did not.
Her father played basketball at OSU.
Okay.
So.
And so can I interject that some 50 years later, we were at a lovely dinner party in New York City, and I happened to have met by chance, her name is Susan, Susan's mother-in-law.
Oh, wow.
Who was in her 90s. And I said, Dorothy, will you just please tell Susan, if it hadn't been for her, Burns wouldn't be president of OSU.
Yeah.
So it all works right. So we've really kept in touch with Susan.
That's amazing. And you're right, like, because, you know, you probably would never have gone there, and then that's your, you know, as being a president, you kind of have to have attended the university, right?
Well, most don't.
Yeah.
I'm only the second graduate that
Really?
is president. Yeah, there's only been 2 in the history of the school.
Interesting. Well,
Since 1890.
So you and Dr. Schrum.
No, well, now
there's actually 3
Yeah,
now, I
but
guess.
she graduated from our med school.
Got you.
But his name was Oliver Wilhelm.
Okay.
Wilhelm, and he actually was president in the 50s and even into my second year at OSU, which was 65.
Yeah. So when you went to OSU, then did you kind of have an idea? This is what I want to do. I'm going to become a, you know.
No, I went with the clear notion that I was going to go to law school. So in order to go to law school, I needed a degree in something.
Okay.
And so I happened to take an accounting course, and I don't think of myself as a real detailed math kind of guy. But I took this accounting course, and Oliver Wilhelm was head of the department, and he's the one that taught the beginning classes because he wanted to hook you.
Okay.
And he hooked me, and so I ended up getting a degree in accounting. But I just needed a degree to go to law school.
Yeah. So, and then you growing up in Texas and going to UT, math is obviously a strong point of yours if you go and do a degree in math.
Well, I did because I didn't like to read and I didn't like to talk. So those are the easy things. And I would just go to the library and wear headphones like you have on and listen to wonderful music and just work these math problems, which was just playing games. I thought, don't tell my dad I'm not studying. I'm just having a good time.
Just playing Sudoku for hours.
Yeah, exactly.
I look at that and it just looks like Chinese to me. I can't. It's just symbols and numbers, and I'm not.
Well, and then you put it together with Latin.
Oh, yeah. Which, I mean, they do go together,
They do go
right?
together.
Most people think they
They're
wouldn't,
cop-outs.
but they do go together.
Exactly.
Yeah. Why? Was it just because like they kind of go together that you fell in love with Latin, or just?
I actually entered college in the School of Business, and my mind was too immature to understand supply and demand. That was about all I got out of economics. And so after the end of my first semester, freshman year, I decided I'd go where my best grades were rather than what my father thought was best for me. So I just loved math, and I just took that route.
Yeah. So obviously, after you graduate, you go to law school. And what about you? What do you do after you graduate? UT?
I ended up working with IBM.
Okay.
And in those days, IBM was hiring female employees. I was one of the first female in the field of systems engineering.
Yeah.
So they hired an aptitude rather than experience. And I just had a fabulous time.
Yeah. In Austin or in Houston?
I was hired in Austin, but I ended up working in Houston.
Okay. Yeah.
And here. After we
married, I worked here in Oklahoma
Got
City.
you. So then, fast forward, then that's where you guys meet is in Houston.
Correct.
And during what time? I know you said it's in the 60s, but then how do you get from together then come to Oklahoma City from then?
Well, as I say, engaged December and were married June 8th, which is the day we met. The date we met, June 8th of 1969, and the Army was looming. And we decided to just kind of drop everything and go to Europe. Neither of us had ever been to Europe, and we decided to go to Europe. And we were there for almost 3 months.
After you graduated from law school. Right. We were married.
I stayed, took the bar exam.
Yeah.
Then we just took off, and we had enough money we were going on. There was a famous book back then by Frommer, I think, called Europe on $5 a Day. And so we were adhering to that. We were each, to $10 a day for the couple. So we went all over and in fact, interesting thing, you being from the UK, we were in Paris. You fly to Luxembourg because it was the cheapest way to fly, and I remember it was like $700 a ticket.
Yeah.
And you can probably do it cheaper than that now if you. But anyway, you go into Luxembourg, and then we went to Paris, and we went to a little hotel, and I couldn't find the bathroom. In that entire time we were in Europe, we never had a private bathroom in our room.
Yeah.
And
That's for $5 a day.
Yeah. So I was looking for the bathroom on this floor, and I saw this blonde head poke out. And so I went down and knocked on his door, and I said, "Excuse me, but do you speak English?" He said, "My dear sir, I am English." And it was Mike and Pauline, and we traveled with them, and we went to London then and visited them in Birmingham.
Yeah, Birmingham.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And just went all around, and we hooked up with a couple in Oxford and traveled with them. They had an Austin Mini.
Yeah.
And then we actually...
It's amazing how you can get 4 people in the back of that.
With luggage. We actually have a film. We've actually filmed doing it. Filmed her putting the luggage in.
Yeah.
And we picked up, I think, one of the very first Super Beetles that came out. It had a long nose on it in Wolfsburg. And went to Berlin, and then just traveled all the way down. So it was a great experience. You never do it. I do remember going into Amsterdam and to the American Express office. I think it was or Rotterdam, one of the. And my mother had sent the clipping out of the newspaper of who passed the bar exam.
Yeah.
And I'm looking down, and I look at Oklahoma City because that's where we went to high school. I look at Stillwater.
Yeah.
I said, how cynical can a mother be to send you? And I didn't pass the bar. And then I looked down to Bartlesville, where my parents had moved first, and I was under Bartlesville. That was the biggest relief I've ever. I don't think I'd ever come home.
It's like, I'm staying here. I'm going to take it here instead. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to stay here. But that must be one of the things I tell everybody who graduates. I'm like, take a year off and just go somewhere, travel, because you can always start work a year later. Like, there's jobs, there's always going to be opportunities, but when you look back, you never really get that opportunity again because some people start families and they have kids, and then you've got to wait 20 years to maybe do that. So going traveling probably in your mid-20s, late 60s, early 70s must have been an absolute blast.
Oh, and then we were young, and people took us in, and
we stayed in a lot of homes. I don't think we could do that today.
So it was a very broadening experience, and I always tell our students, if you get a chance, study abroad. I mean, at least go abroad. Because there's so many study abroad programs at universities.
Right. Yeah, I had a friend who went to OU. Actually, went to OU Law, and they have an Oxford collaboration. I think they go for 6 weeks or something.
And we have one in Cambridge.
Yeah, so much fun. You got to see it. It's and. Have you been back since to see similar places?
Yeah. We were just in London. We went to Ascot.
Oh, lovely. To see horse racing?
Yes.
How was that experience?
Oh, well, I've got
real horse racing,
picture
right?
of me with a top hat and tail.
Top hat and tail,
and Anne's hat had feathers.
Yeah.
So it was great fun. An OSU grad invited us.
Brilliant.
It has.
Yeah, that's got to be one of the great perks for you both as well, is over your time as President and First Lady, getting the invites from grads who are from all over the world to say, we'd love to host you, come on over, and then you have this experience, but you don't get it from a tourist sense. You get the first-hand, personal guide experience.
Yeah, thanks to
so spoiled.
Oliver Wilhelm's predecessor, Henry Bennett, who was kind of the not founding father, but he was president for 30 years or so. But he had a very international bent.
Yeah.
So he developed relationships with universities, which then were all over the world, which was then actually he was a friend of Harry Truman's, and Harry Truman created a thing called the Point Four program. Mm-hmm. And it was really sharing American know-how with the developing world. And a university they started, or he helped start. Well, I'm backing up. Harry Truman appointed him as the director, so he took a leave of absence from OSU, and started doing it. And in fact, was killed in a plane crash with his wife outside of Tehran in I think '51. But he started a university in Ethiopia called Hargis University. And that was started, it kind of got going finally in 54, so basically an ag school.
Yeah.
But, and Oliver Wilhelm spoke at Hargis at one time. But nobody had gone there, no president had gone there since.
Yeah.
And then our 50th anniversary, we
Celebrated it.
well, we flew to London. There's a place called the Clifton House, which is out of this world, north of London, closer to Ascot. And then went to Ethiopia, and I gave the commencement speech at Hargis, which is now a university with like 30,000 students. It has a medical school. It's got a law school. It was quite a great experience. And then we came back to UK and finished off toasting our honeymoon,
That's
our 50th
amazing.
wedding anniversary.
What a way to celebrate your 50th wedding anniversary. Yeah.
Yeah, it was remarkable. But you also talk about world travels. It's
Oh, yeah.
amazing how small the world is. And we have a bazillion stories, but one of my favorite is being in the airport in Dubai, 3 o'clock in the morning Dubai time. And it is like, it's like Grand Central Station on steroids.
Every
And
native
we are-
dress, every language.
we are hauling our luggage, and through this cross section of chaos, somebody says, "Go Pokes." And so there were OSU grads who were also traveling the world,
Yeah.
3 o'clock in the morning, who saw our luggage. So you just connect with people
That's amazing.
everywhere you go.
Yeah, we visited a lot of those universities because we have these ongoing programs.
Yeah.
China Agricultural, we have a shared ag program. Southwest Jiangtong in Chengdu, we have an engineering program, Food Ed University, business programs. These are all in China, but they're in Turkey and Buenos Aires and
Malaysia.
Brazil and Malaysia, you name it, Thailand, yeah. And the beauty of it is when you're there, you're hosted by the university. And university presidents are a big deal over there. Not so much here, but they're a big deal over there. I remember, just as an example, in Bangkok, there's this wonderful temple, and I mean, people are lined up around it maybe twice trying to get in. We drove in they opened the gates, we drove in because of the university.
Yeah.
So it is the ideal way to visit a country.
It spoils you. It does.
Yeah. And well, that's the thing. Like for people around the world, and obviously, like you come to the States, there's massive universities everywhere, right? And everyone's got a logo, and everyone understands. But you don't get, other than think of the cliche places in the UK, Cambridge, Oxford, and because I'm a golfer, the University of St Andrews, Stirling up there's great, but it's not. You don't really get that. Because of the sporting element as well, I think it raises the profile because we don't have that sporting element to, you don't get 80 to 100,000 people show up to a rugby game back home. You might get 8 people and they're usually wives and girlfriends of people playing. So that obviously helps raise the profile because people love college sports. And then, like you said, you travel with a logo and people recognize you. They know.
Yeah, and I think it's a real deficiency internationally because in a way, athletics become the front door of the university. I mean, a lot of people go there because of their academic programs, but it's the sporting events that bring alums back, and then they rekindle their affection for the place and support it academically.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And like you said, I'm sure there's so many stories from your travels, and we could have a travel podcast if we wanted to.
Truly.
So when you come back, then is that would be past the bar? You're at IBM and you get a job here, or do you get a job?
Well, I still
Dallas?
had another year of law school.
Okay.
And I guess I was probably interning or doing something.
You were.
My senior
But you
year.
had no job graduating because of the Army commitment.
Okay.
So then I got out of law school. I kind of associated with a couple of firms because I didn't know when they were going to call me. And
did you have a draft number then?
No, I didn't,
No?
because I was already in. When I was in school, you had to do ROTC for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I ended up doing all 4 years at 3 years in order to get a deferment to go to law school.
Okay.
And when I got out, I finally switched. I originally was in military intelligence, And because James Bond had just come out, and I thought tuxedos, beautiful women, that's for me.
Yeah.
Well,
shaken not stirred is the
quite
lifestyle
like
I want to live. Yeah, driving Aston Martins all day.
So I ended up moving over to the Fighting Men of Finance,
Okay.
the Finance Corps.
Yeah.
And so we ended up only having to do 3 months at Indianapolis, Fort Benjamin Harrison, which was the home of the Fighting Men of Finance, the Adjutant Generals, and the WACs, what we had there. But did 3 months there, and then I did 6 years in the reserves here at the 95th Division.
Okay. Why did you want to go to law school from a young age then?
My great-grandfather was in the first law class at the University of Texas.
Okay.
And he lived till he was 96 and was very, he was just a very prominent lawyer, but a small-town lawyer. He's from a little town. He wasn't in a little town called Goliad, Texas. Most people, in Oklahoma, if they'd still do it this way, you only take Oklahoma history one semester in the 9th grade or something like that. In Texas, you take it every year. And the battle cry always was, remember the Alamo, remember Goliad, because that's where Santa Anna went after the Alamo.
Okay.
And massacred an army there, and then went to San Jacinto and ran into Sam Houston, and and then he hightailed it back to Mexico.
Yeah.
But so he was kind of my model. I just really liked him. Perry Mason was a big TV show in those days. It just. I don't know. It just
you go
always
from James Bond to Perry Mason.
Yeah.
You have all these role models.
Yeah. So
it worked out okay, didn't it?
It really did. I practiced law. Well, we went to Indianapolis. We had our first son, first child, I guess I should say, in the Army.
Yeah.
And it cost something like $7 and something, and that's because Ann ate.
I was a fairly cheap baby when you think about it. You're about $5 a day, babies for $7.
Well, and Ed was professional, and she brought to the marriage a color TV and just lots of stuff.
A dowry. Sure.
Yeah, her dowry was a largesse of stuff.
Oh, that's brilliant. So did you know what you want? Law you wanted to practice, or you just wanted to be a lawyer?
I thought I'd be a litigator.
Okay.
I thought I'd try cases. And I ended up at a firm that was very engaged in commercial law and in Chapter 11 bankruptcies and that kind of reorganizations and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then, so I was there. It was Reynolds Writings and became Reynolds Writings at Hargis in the First National Center down there.
Wow.
And on the 28th floor.
Yeah.
And then the firm represented the FDIC. And in 1982, the FDIC decided to close Penn Square Bank, which was really one of the first closings of a bank since the 30s. And we represented them, and my partner at the time was kind of starting to slow down. He was probably in his 60s.
Yeah, he was really young.
A lot younger than I am.
60s, yeah.
And he said, I just don't want to take this on. And I said, well, I do. I mean, I was in my 30s, and I was
ready to go.
Go get it. And it just ballooned into this massive crisis, really, for the state of Oklahoma. But in terms of a lawyer's experience, it was really incredible.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden I got bled into reorganization work, and I stayed in that until I ran for governor in 1990, and came back and practiced law for another 7 years, I guess, and then I went to Bank of Oklahoma as the vice chairman.
Yeah. And during this timeline, are you still growing at IBM? I know you have your first son. Well, what is kind of your point up to?
I do stay with IBM for several years after that, but then I reached the point where you either work or you have family.
Yeah.
And I wasn't, in those days, I wasn't willing, or it didn't interest me, so I became interested in volunteerism and raising our children.
Yeah. With the volunteer side, and I know we're going to get to this a little later, but does that come from just I need to do something? Or
It does. It does.
I can't just raise these kids because they're going to drive me
can't.
nuts.
Well, not only that, I'm not the best mother I could be if I'm not happy myself.
Sure.
So I think I was just raised being involved. I was involved all through school, college.
Yeah.
I don't sit around easily.
Yeah,
So I just became who I was,
right. And you have a son and a daughter?
a son and a daughter.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you have grandkids now?
3.
We do. We have a grandson with a birthday today. as
Oh,
a matter of
amazing.
fact.
Yeah. Happy birthday to the grandson.
Yeah, happy birthday, Oliver.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, so it brings back to what you just said. You kind of go through Pennsylvania Bank happens, and like I said, you're in your 30s, and this is an opportunity that might never happen again in your lifetime. So I can understand why you're excited to do it. And then you kind of go through this period. How do we get into politics and running for governor? Because that's a big decision to make, and I'm sure you guys had many dinners together saying, "Hey, do I want to do this really?"
Yeah. I got interested in politics pretty early on.
Okay.
I was involved in. I'm trying to get my dates straight.
Precinct
like in
level.
'72, I was active.
Actually, in law school, when we married, you were active.
Yeah, primarily in Republican politics,
Okay.
and I worked. My first big role was working with Henry Bellman when he ran for re-election to the U.S. Senate. But I was on the state election board, and I had a high school classmate that was in the general counsel's office in Allstate in Chicago, and called me and asked me if I wanted to represent them out at the Capitol.
Yeah.
And I said, that business of going out to dinner and every night and all that stuff. I'm not. He said, no, you just bill us by the hour. Just don't go out there if you don't need to go out there. So I would do that during the sessions, not full time, but I spent a lot of time out there at the Capitol. Even back in law school, as Ann alluded to, I worked for the Vice President of University Relations, and I think I'm the first one that had that job because there was a series of much more successful politicians than I that followed in that job. But my job basically was to follow all the legislation and anything that affected higher education generally or OU specifically. I was to highlight and get instructions of what we wanted with reference to that legislation. But as I was told by the vice president, your main job is to keep that bar stocked at the Biltmore Hotel. So I made sure to do that.
Yeah.
So it started even way back then. And then Henry Bellman left the Senate, and then he ran for governor again, the second time, in 1986. And of course, I was very involved in that campaign. And then he named me as chairman of the Department of Human Services.
Okay.
And that's a volunteer job. It's not a paid job. But as I would always say, Bellman gave you that kind of job if you didn't give him enough money. So I chaired the Department of Human Services during a very tricky time because it had always been supported by sales tax.
Okay.
And the legislature had, well, maybe it was even the people, I can't remember, it was a voter. But anyway, it was done away with. And so now all of a sudden, now we got to go with our hand out to the legislature.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting time. And when I think back on it now, you end up closing banks, you end up suing directors of banks, you go through all of that, then you go to the welfare department. What a perfect background to run for governor. What was I thinking?
But I want to seriously throw in, and Henry Bellman's not here to defend this, but I believe he really saw potential in Burns. And he was the one who called Burns and said, I'm not running for governor, it's all yours.
Yeah.
So he actually not only supported, but encouraged Burns to run.
Yeah.
And he'd never run for office, so it was kind of one of those.
Right.
The Republican Party had made a hard right turn about then.
Okay.
And the issue of abortion had just kind of risen up, and Bellman was not considered nearly conservative enough.
Right.
In fact, he had promoted a House Bill 1017, which was to support common education with a tax in it. and that wasn't popular.
Yeah.
So there's the third rung of why I shouldn't have run.
Yeah.
But we had a very spirited race. There were 4 of us basically in the race, and on the Republican side.
Yeah.
And a former U.S. Attorney, Bill Price, who had prosecuted a lot of the county commissioners in the state, ended up getting the nomination.
Okay.
But then he was defeated in the general by David Walters.
Yeah, I interviewed Bill a few months ago about his book.
Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating story. The book's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
But he was very involved, and he loves politics too.
Yeah, oh, yeah. He was better at it than I was.
Yeah, he had some fascinating stories, and that was a really interesting chat with him from the corruption side of things.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. So during this time then, obviously, like 95, the bombing happens in 95. Were you guys living in Oklahoma City at that point?
Yeah.
And working and around, and obviously you got kids here at that point and everything?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a kind of a dark day, and for obvious reasons, but with just my marriage, I was in Choctaw and heard the bomb, felt the bomb. But I thought it was a sonic boom.
Yeah.
Because I'm out by Tinker.
Right.
I later found out they had banned sonic booms back in the 60s. So.
Which is also a fascinating, if you want to dive into that, that's fascinating. They actually did that.
So I didn't really realize what had happened. I couldn't get a cell signal. But I went to another meeting, and I was in that building a lot.
Yeah.
And, of course, Ann couldn't find me. And I should have called, and I didn't, and I just didn't know really what had happened. But when we bring up that, but in the aftermath of that, and to a lesser extent, I were very involved in trying to work with the Red Cross.
Yeah, I became manic. It was the emotional upheaval of a personal trying to find my husband and feeling like, I actually had people coming over making coffee. We were getting ready for the funeral. It was not a pretty day. But because of that, my response was to get very involved. Yeah. So I buried myself in it. And after about a month, I thought, you're in this for the wrong reasons. There are plenty of people who can take over now. Yeah. You don't have to save the world. But I got involved in setting up the church for recovery. Uh-huh. And only because we lived here, I could make phone calls and call someone and say, we need 72 printers or whatever we needed at the time, and get results from people. So I became kind of a command center coordinator. And of course, there were no lines set up, so everyone was leaving note papers, and I would see a paper that someone left something to be done that had not been done. So I'd take that paper and get it done. So it was miscommunications till it got organized.
There were a lot of people. The city really came together.
Incredible. It was an incredible time. And so anyway.
Yeah.
And interest on this theme of politics. So, in 1992, I was paired with Mike Turpin, who was a former Democratic Attorney General, to comment on all the primaries on Channel 4, KFR. And it went, and we did it all year long. And then at the election, K4 beat the other stations by doubled them combined. I don't know if I said that right. But anyway, had great ratings. And so they decided they'd make a show out of our deal. Yeah. And so in February of 93, we started Flashpoint. And it was on like every other week, I think, until May, and then it went every week. And our original moderator was Devin Scillian, who later became, and is today, the anchor of the NBC affiliate in Detroit. Then Kevin Ogle stepped in, and Kevin did it. I can't remember when the transition was, but Kevin's done it a lot longer, and so we did that show for 15 years.
Wow!
It's still on, and now it's on. Mike's with Todd Lamb now, but. Who ran for governor and lost. So that's the only way you get a TV show, is run for governor and lose.
Become the expert.
Yeah, so we did that. So I was always with my legal career, I was always I kind of like Ann was saying, I was really more interested in serving the community, and got a number of opportunities to do that. And that's hard to do when you're a lawyer and you're billing by the hour.
Right.
So we, which I always say is one of the most creative times in life, is when lawyers put their time slips together. But I really, so that kept us going in politics. Of course, when the bombing happened, we were on the air, and not literally on the air, but I mean, we still were doing shows through that. And gosh, the Branch Davidian deal in Waco, Texas, and there's just so many tragedies that, the OSU plane crash that killed 10 people was all during that. So it was, and then there were a lot of happy.
Sure.
We had a lot of George W. Bush came by. We had Tim Russler.
Guests on your show.
Yeah, lots of nationally prominent guests. So that was a good time, and they're still on. And
But you had to become apolitical when you went to.
I quit the show.
Yeah, sure. You can't.
I can't make fun.
left
of
everybody.
I can't make fun of. I can't make fun of politicians anymore. So.
Yeah, that's not good for the OSU brand, is it? For presidents,
yes, that's right.
Giving people grief just because their political views and bills and stuff they want to pass. Fantastic.
But the way that show worked, the reason I think it worked, and ratings-wise it did work, is that we tried to disagree agreeably.
Yeah.
I mean, we never, never talked to each other like they talk now on the television that you hear. We always said we tried to get some humor into it as well. So, I mean, I think it was Mike that coined the idea that we wanted enough information to be helpful, but enough silliness to make it fun.
Yeah, definitely. Because otherwise, you're right. Because if it has a fun element to it, it draws people in, right? Because people just don't want to listen.
Correct.
People don't want to hear people get mad at each other.
No, and if you put in too much information, it kind of just washes out all the other stuff, right? You have to, which is it's an interesting skill for you guys to have, and also you guys gelled pretty well to have that show for as long as it was on, and just because I mean the TV world is all ratings, and if your ratings go down, then they're thinking of something else to put in place.
Yeah.
So a lot of fun to have.
Yeah, in fact, we were on in Tulsa on actually the ABC affiliate there, and they were bought by a firm, and the general manager called me and he said, a preacher wants your slot for $3,000. Pay $3,000 for your slot, and if you want to pay us $3,000 or get advertising, they'll give us that much, then that's fine. And I said, wait a minute. You're supposed to pay me.
Right.
So that was the end of our time in Tulsa.
Yeah. So during this time then, about what you said earlier, does the banking thing come around because you kind of had an interest to it from the Penn Bank side of things?
Not really, no.
How do you get to being at Bank of Oklahoma?
I had done some legal work with George Kaiser in Tulsa, and George bought Bank of Oklahoma, and which had a big branch here and of course in Tulsa, where it's headquartered. And George invited me to come on the board. I think Royce Hammonds had a lot to do with that, as a matter of fact, when he was then at BOK. And so I went on the board, I think in 93 maybe, something like that.
Gotcha.
And so then in 97, the I guess president of the bank here in Oklahoma City wanted to go do something else with the company, but he wanted to do something else.
Is that Wayne Stone?
Well, it was Wayne Stone, and I said, Wayne, that was the director, and he was saying, I want to go do something else, which was really go to Arkansas and buy banks and stuff over there for BOK. And I said, well, Wayne, you got to find somebody. You're the face of the bank here, and you're going to have to find somebody that. And he finally came around. He said, well, how about you? And I said, I don't want. I mean, I was just kind of tongue-tied. And anyway, George and Stan Lieberger, who was the president of the overall operation, said, how about coming over to the bank and taking that position as vice chairman? And I remember saying, well, what about my show? And they said, oh no, we like you being on the show.
Yeah.
I mean, that's people,
Good for business.
Yeah. So that's how. So I was at the bank for 10 years.
Yeah.
And in 2001, Frank Keating appointed me to the Regents of Oklahoma State. And I did that for about 5 years. And then when Dave Smidley, my predecessor, came, decided to leave. I don't remember. I think one of the regents.
This is a pattern. You get on a board of directors and you end up
running the show.
So, but how about you? And Leland Gorley with the Friday newspaper had written a couple of editorials about how I ought to be a governor. One of them wasn't that flattering. He said, well, it's time we had a funny governor.
Yeah.
But anyway, we talked a lot about it. And finally, Doug Burns, who was the chairman at the time, the chair of the search committee, said, well, the law is you have to be gone from the Regents, off the Regents for a year before you can go to work for the university.
Okay.
And he said, why don't you just go ahead and resign and at least get that time running?
Sure.
And you get out of some board meetings. I mean, and so I did. I resigned in July. I still had not 100% decided that was what I ought to do.
Right.
And frankly, the defeat in the governor's race way back in 1990, after we'd worked so hard, I'm not saying we worked well, but we would work hard.
Right. You clearly wanted it.
Yeah. And I had deep emotional scars from that.
Yeah. And
in fact, the assumption was we'd run again in 94. And I really didn't want to, and I really couldn't afford it. We put a lot of money in the race, and then I looked, and that's when Boren stepped down from the U.S. Senate. We looked at that, and we just decided to stay put, and I think it was the right decision.
Yeah.
I mean, even had I won the governor's race, I'd probably never been president of Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
So it's all worked out.
It's amazing when you look back, right? You look back at little turns and people you meet and how you end up in. I mean, it's fascinating.
But they finally
get to where they're at.
That's why you relax with what's happening.
Yeah.
Just let it happen.
Yeah.
So in 2000, so I resigned from the Regents January 1st of 2007. And we were getting close, and they said, you need to put in an application. You've got to, I said, I don't want, look, you know everything about me. I don't want to do that. And deep inside, I just didn't want to lose again, And I'd had a wonderful run as chairman of the chamber for a couple of years and just a lot of great positions, and I just didn't want to, to lose. I talked to George Kaiser, and he said, well, he was on the higher regents, state regents, at one time under Bellman, and he said, well, I don't think you'll have a short honeymoon, but it gets pretty rough.
Yeah.
So I finally decided to go for it, and I think it was December 7th.
Is that your dad's statement about if 10 people tell you?
Yeah, 10 people tell you you're drunk, you ought to lay down.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
His other great line was, don't worry too much about what other people think about you, because the truth is they don't think about you very much. They don't think about you
at all.
Yeah.
But
you win. You win.
Well, I get picked by the Regents, and and that was in December, and then I was kind of working for the university a lot. And in March, the Governor Brad Henry, and the legislature passed a bill that shortened that time to 6 months. So I was able to take over as president March 10th.
Yeah.
And the other interesting thing that happens is once you're named in that position, whether it's your position or not, others assume you are.
Yeah.
So Burns was hit with many decisions that were not his to be made. And it was like the university was in a stagnant place. So I think that was another reason why it just needed to be done.
Yeah, because you're in a weird place then, aren't you? You're like, I know I'm next, but I'm my job. The person who's finishing still
Was
got to finish
Well,
out.
Actually, the one that
Yeah.
finished, well, it was a little more smooth than that.
Yeah.
Because Dave Smedley had actually been gone about a year,
Oh, okay.
and he went to the University of New Mexico.
Okay.
And a very able academic named Marlene Straith, who was the provost, became the interim president.
Mm-hmm.
But Marlene would, if there was any issue that outlived her time as president, she would call me and we'd talk about it, what we ought to do. The big issue at the time that I was having to deal with is our hospital in Tulsa. And when I was chairman of the Department of Human Services, the OU teaching hospitals were under DHS. In fact, the state had put a lot of stuff under DHS just because it had that dedicated sales tax. And the question was, do we want title to that hospital over there? Because it was inland authority. And I wanted no part of that because I'd dealt with it before, and I'd been on the Integris board.
Yeah.
And so it just, and we were going round and round about that. So that was the big thing that was taking all the time. Plus, you're trying to figure out what's what.
Sure.
And it's just, what I advise my successor, Casey Shrum, is don't try not to make any decisions you don't have to make. I mean, there'll be decisions you have to make, but in terms of moving people around and just settle in, understand the chemistry, understand the culture, who to listen to, who to watch out for, and it takes a few months for that to percolate.
Yeah, and to that point, she did take over probably the hardest first year. First years with all COVID
bless
and
her heart.
everything.
I mean, it wasn't like days after July 1st, the OU Texas
NCA.
departure was announced.
Yeah, it's crazy. Isn't
Yeah.
it? So you win. You know. Do you just pack up the bags and move to Stillwater? Like, I mean, what? Do you live in Stillwater at that time? Like, or do you commute?
No. There was a president's house there.
Okay.
And Marlene was not living in it.
Okay.
And we've had our home, the one we're in now, we bought in 1987, and we decided not to sell it because we thought really, my first contract was a 3-year contract.
Okay.
So, and I think the expectation was I'd stay 5 because I was 62 when I became president. So we kept the home here in Oklahoma City, and we lived and we lived on the road as much as we lived in the Wilhelm house. So raising money and my view of my job was to basically run the operation or manage the operation, to raise money, and to deal with the politics.
Yeah.
And because it's a very political place, internally and externally.
Yeah.
Woodrow Wilson, when he ran for governor of New Jersey, had been president of Princeton. And reporters asked him why he was running for governor, and he said to get out of politics. So it's Ann, I would describe, now you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Ann was not just jumping for joy that we were doing this. I mean,
You get to 60s, you think, it's time to slow down.
Oh, no,
right?
it
Enjoy
wasn't even
life.
slowing down. It was truly enjoying the good life.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of leisure time.
Travel. The kids are older now. They're taking care of themselves, right?
Travel. I mean, it was a beautiful time of life. So why rock the boat? We know how much fun this is.
I think swamp the boat.
So it wasn't that I objected. It was like, it wasn't a desire of mine.
Yeah.
So Ann will always say, the same way with the governor's race, Ann ended up loving the governor's race. She wanted to run in 94.
Yeah.
And so...
I'm slow to move. I was slow to make a decision.
You have to drag her kicking and screaming to these things. And she ended up just being the brightest star on that campus. It was just wonderful, wonderful
Did you kind of fall in love with back to like your kind of love to give back, raise money, be involved?
All of it.
You must have fallen in love with that stuff.
I fell in love with it. I did. And I started out not knowing, I didn't know how many colleges were in the university. I knew nothing.
Right.
There's a long story about how little I knew that I should have known. But in order to know more about this university, I got involved and I took a tour of something every week.
Yeah.
And then I also was a certified yoga instructor, so I was asked to teach some classes, and you find the top 10% of everybody in an organization is the top 10% taking the opportunities. So consequently, I was teaching yoga to the dean's wives or the active people on campus. So when we would have a reception, I would know the spouses. And Burns was kind of going, how do you know those? Well, they were in my yoga class. So I got to know an element of the school that I wouldn't have if I'd just gone to, and I didn't plan it that way. It just happened that way.
Yeah.
And likewise, as I selfishly was trying to get to know the university, I was visiting places. You said, we've been on this campus for 30 years. Nobody's ever come to visit us. And so people were grateful that I was just curious.
Yeah.
And it was a selfish motive on my part. So it all sort of evolved into this serendipity, wonderful experience. Everywhere I went, it was like a kid in a candy store.
Yeah.
Well, and being around
Those
25,000
students.
20-year-olds is wonderful. You notice when I talked about the things that I do, one thing I didn't mention is academics, and that was on purpose. I mean, I'm not an academic.
Yeah.
I think my job is to hire a really good provost. And I ended up having the final approval on dean candidates and the like. The one thing I did that was that really taught me a hard lesson is there was a proposed, and I won't go into details about it, but there was a proposed research project that would involve injecting baboons with anthrax or other lethal agents, and then seeing how they reacted to various treatments.
Yeah.
But in the end, they were to be euthanized. And I had, and I still am on the board of OMRF, and I talked to, God rest his soul, Steve Prescott, who was the director then, who counseled me on it, and I did a little bit other due diligence, and I decided that we don't want to get involved in this. We basically had the deal because we had the lab that you had to have for that kind of primary research. Sure. And the real principal guy was in Boston, but he had been here.
Yeah.
Anyway, I decided not to do it. Well, it just caused all kinds of. One of the scientists that was going to do the project wrote a letter to the editor of the Oklahoman and the Tulsa World, and said I was frustrating the war effort, and I was being an anti-research, and I was in every science magazine in the world, plus
with a target on your back,
plus Newsweek and Time had an article about how. Of course, I was being applauded by the animal rights activists, but that wasn't really why I did it, and I can't really talk about why. The bottom line, anyway, the faculty council did an inquiry into it, and the other complicating factor was Boone Pickens, kind of the patron saint of OSU. His wife, Madeline Pickens, is a strong animal rights activist, and the thought was on campus that I had bent to her will. I never talked to Madeline ever about any of this, but. It was a grim, miserable time, and I finally learned the hard lesson that in academics, process trumps outcome. If you don't go through the process, I should have gone to the Animal Rights Committee. I should have gone to that's not what it's called, but met with the dean of the vet school, just touched all the bases, the faculty council. I think it would have been fine.
Yeah.
And
But
so,
again, that's why education is slow to move, because you have
Sure.
to build that consensus, and it takes a long time rather than just make the right decision and move.
yeah, the other thing that happened really early on in our time up there was we had a big, beautiful library lawn, and a concrete block wall was being erected by students out just right there on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And they were spray painting every vile, awful word you can think of, or words.
Sure.
And I just thought, here comes some mother from Dallas with her daughter, and they walks by and sees this thing. And so I was kind of Ronald Reagan, tear down this wall. Well, the student affairs vice president came to see me, and she said, this thing is being built and being defiled, so that in 3 days they will knock it down with sledgehammers to symbolize destroying hate. And if you tear down that wall, this whole thing will be over in 3 days.
Yeah.
But if you tear down that wall, I mean, you're going to be messing with this for months.
Oh wow, yeah.
And I actually took her advice. And
Closed your blinds.
She said, "Close your blinds. Don't walk that way."
3 days. Just give me 3 days.
3 days.
And don't allow visitors on campus.
Yeah, exactly. But you're right, because people walk up the street to, up that lawn, and it's right there.
Man.
You can't miss it, can you?
Oh, I walked by it. I couldn't believe what
it
they'd
makes you
written on it.
freeze. Yeah.
Oh, jeez. So, and back to kind of the yoga thing. You're very health conscious then, and does that lead into you just kind of starting and leading this kind of the nation's healthiest campus?
America's
Probably
campus,
right?
one thing led to another, but
Yeah.
I will say there was an atmosphere on campus when I got there, thanks to another generous donor named Bud Sarantine, who believed in this in the 90s.
Yeah.
So long before I got there was a wellness center, unlike many other universities. That was for faculty and staff, not so much for students.
Okay.
So, yes, there were things in place, but we just sort of made the communications and brought awareness to the forefront and combined students and faculty staff.
Right, yeah. Because everyone knows the freshman 15, right? You get to school and you're like, now I get to eat whatever I want.
And believe me, it does exist. It's still here. So you're just fighting it.
No doubt. But it's really cool to kind of tie in your kind of love and passion for
how genuine
activity.
it all came about. It
yeah.
wasn't forced. I mean, it just came
And Ann's
from
an
within.
athlete, very good tennis player, water skier, golf. So
Yeah, I'm not scared of the water, but I would break something if I would to ski on snow or ski on water. I'm better in the boat. I'll
Better in the boat,
stay in
watching
the boat
others.
for sure. What's I guess when you're during this kind of period where you're in charge of the university, what are some of the stuff that, like, common misconceptions people think that obviously you get all the perks and you get to go to all the games and have a great time, but you really don't have a downtime. What are the common misconceptions of people think that, life must be great as a president and first lady of a university?
yeah, and it is great
And
for
it
the
is.
most part.
It is.
But I think they think one of the concerns making me president was my lack of academic experience, and I had the same concern, but I kind of. You go from, I'm not qualified till I'm perfect for this job.
I was made for this job.
And in many ways, I think I was.
We're trained,
because of all of our activities, all the political activities over the years, the notoriety as a result of that television show. I had raised a lot of money a lot of times. Ann and I had done a lot of that during our time here before the OSU job. So the more I thought about it, the real job here is to raise money. We needed money, either from the legislature or from private individuals. The politics and fundraising was there, and I had experience running an operation there at Bank of Oklahoma. So you just, in my opinion, in this day and age, fundraising is the prime. You want somebody that's competent to run the business and be the face of the university, but to be a good fundraiser, you're going to have to be the face. You've got to get out and get with it. And it's So I really did. I think that worked well, and I just always tried to have a very experienced provost. And we talk about it, and we talk about the things, but I would almost always defer to whatever their advice was.
Yeah.
I think
On academics.
Yeah.
a misconception on another note is people think you're busy every single minute of 24/7. And when you're on a college campus, most events are over, at least the receptions we would have by 8 o'clock.
Sure.
Because students, their night starts after they leave your house.
Yeah.
So a lot of nights we were through by 8 or 9. Not when we were out of town, because usually when you're doing
Sure.
adult entertainment, you're going later hours. But anything involving the students is over fairly quickly, and no alcohol, and you're just, it's relaxing. It's invigorating while it's happening, but you're not stressed till midnight every single night. Although we would do 3 and 4 events within a night, every single night.
Yeah.
So you're going a lot, but you can just, actually, I think you touch and go so much. You just go, you make your appearance, and you're gone. It dawned on me one Sunday we were in church, and I thought, I've been here long enough. We don't do that in church.
Yeah, I've shaken the hands I need to shake. It's time to go.
I know.
My wife would love that.
I said my prayer.
She could definitely do that schedule. Yeah. Okay, we've been here now. We've got a picture. It's time to leave.
That's it. Yeah.
Which is so funny. But you're right, though, because and the, sort of the bad side of it, or the downfall of that, is when you're at a place, you're like, I really want to stay, but I have 6
For
other
sure.
engagements to go
For
to.
sure.
That's the
You
sad
got both
part,
sides
right?
of that.
Yeah, because you go to one, you're like, I really want to be here. You know?
Yeah.
So back on the fundraising, early on, and having been a regent, I knew the financial situation. And so we got very lucky because the state of Oklahoma had a program, matching endowed chairs dollar for dollar. And I was called to the legislature early in the springs. We're getting rid of this thing, or we're dramatically cutting back on it. And I said, when? And they said, well, we think July 1st of next year.
Yeah.
And that was important because at the time OSU had really not pursued that very much, and we had about $12 million in the queue to be matched, and OU had in the $80 million range to be matched, and it was first come, first serve. Well, then in May they come back and we've decided to cut it off July 1st. This is 2008. I started.
Great.
And so I figured, and David Bourne and I, who have been friends for many, many years, he was in law school for a little bit of my time there. David and I agreed that we would, whatever we each had on July 1st, we'll just split it ratably. So if he had raised $50 million and we had raised $50 million, then we'll each get 50. So that's... or if they had 2/3 and we had 1/3, that's the way it would work.
Yeah.
So I just thought I had to catch OU immediately. Yeah. So I, as I flippantly say, when you need $100 million, what do you do? You fly to Dallas.
You fly to Dallas to see Boone Pickens. Yes, exactly.
One misconception is I think most people think every one of my fundraising letters began "Dear Boone" or "Dear Mr. Pickens." And so Boone agreed to do that.
Yeah.
And so we had $100 million in the bank, and that probably got us pretty even with OU. And then he agreed that he would match his $100 million, would match any money that was given by other private donors.
Amazing.
And the endowed chair would be in their name, not his name.
What a guy.
And so we raised $66 million. I never lived it down because you left 30, whatever it is, in my math.
Yeah.
But we ended up, so that launched us into a fundraising campaign, which was called Branding Success.
Yeah.
It was first supposed to be called Unbridled. And darn if SMU didn't get unbridled before we did. So we went to Branding Success.
To that point of Boone, because obviously he's very involved and his name's on the building at the Hall of Fame, and just kind of his legacy is I mean, the reach is incredible. What do you? I mean, what are your like best memories of Boone, and for both of you, whether it's from a president and first lady perspective, or just as a hey, I met you before we were president? What comes to mind?
Not many people get to just spend as much time with a legend as we did. I mean, and
Did you go to his ranch?
Oh, many times. Yeah, he really was. I mean, he was a legend in the country. I mean, he had made his mark in shareholder rights. They called him a raider, corporate raider, but he had made. And we'd met him. We were at a dinner party at Bellman when Bellman was governor. We were at a dinner party with Boone and his then wife.
Yeah.
B, and. But I think that's the only time I was around him until I became a regent. And we worked a lot on something that was called Gift of a Lifetime, which actually didn't turn out working very well. But I was with him a lot during that. In fact, they would meet in my conference room at BOK. Yeah. And we just kind of hit it off. And in fact, one day we were going to have a meeting on that with several people. And I picked him up at the airport. And in his whatever he had then, big airplane. Yeah. And I remember exactly where we were. We're just short of me turning into the garage under the BOK building. And he said, you ought to be president of OSU. And I said, I can't do that, Boone. I'm not an academic. I mean, I probably can't take the money cut. He said, well, how much money do you have? And I said, well, that's kind of personal.
Not as much as you, that's for sure.
His second book was called The First Billion is the Hardest. And I said, I've always found that to be true.
Yeah, still working on that.
But he was, he was very direct. He was a visionary. And we got to do so many things with Boone over the years.
And he never forgot his Holdenville roots. I mean, every time I was around him, he initiated, hi, Boone Pickens. I mean, whether that person knew who he was or not, that was the way he introduced every conversation. Right. He would be the first. I think there was just a lot of
I was involved when, I don't think I was on the board here, but I was involved. I was on the board at one time. But I think he with his name going on this building and the money that was being talked about, I worked with him on that. Yeah. And I can't remember what it was, $6 million maybe or something like that. So, but we just got to do so many things. I mean, in New York, and we went to the Reagan Library for the debates when I guess. No, Trump wasn't in on that, was he? No, that was before that. Yeah. But the Mesa Vista Ranch is remarkable, and it's coincidentally, it was about 75,000 acres, and it was called Mesa Vista. Uh-huh. The ranch immediately to the north, where the Mesas were, is owned by another OSU graduate, Harold Corson, and I was at the ranch. For I don't know why I would have been out there, just maybe Mike Holder and I had gone out there. And we're sitting at dinner, and Boone had Harold come over for dinner. And out of nowhere, Harold says, Boone, something's been really bugging me. And he said, what's that, Harold? And he said, and he's got 75,000 acres and lots of oil. And all that. And he said, you've named your ranch Mesa Vista, but the Mesas are on my ranch. So you're using my Vista to name your ranch, and I think you ought to pay me something for it. And I went, how do I get out of this room? And Boone said, okay, what do you think I ought to pay you? And he said, well, you always say you're such a fair man. I mean, you just, look, Harold, if you're not that, I'm getting so uncomfortable. And then I find out that they do this to every fresh meat that walks in there. So, real characters. One of the most magical, and I still kick myself for not recording it. Yeah. Ace Greenberg, who was from Oklahoma City, actually played football at OU for a year, but ended up finishing in Missouri. Was the managing partner of Bear Stearns in New York. And it was Ace that did all the early buying of stock that Boone was trying to get in and get control of, whether it was a Unocal or City Service or Phillips, you name it. And Ace is a master bridge player, but he's also a magician. And one night, he had all the little kids that grow up on the ranch, which, by the way, Boone would send to any college they wanted to go to. He'd pay for the whole thing. Ace and so he came over, and Ace did magic tricks for the kids. Then they left, and we're sitting in this great room, which is just enormous, with 2 big fireplaces and
walk-in fireplaces,
incredible art.
Yeah.
And Ace and Boone got to talking about all those takeover tries.
Would have been your best podcast ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would.
Yeah. I've done their interviews. I interviewed him several. He didn't like to give speeches. He liked to be interviewed.
Well, he'd kind of go off track.
Well, yeah. I mean, he's all over that. But anyway, the Pickett's plan was being moved to natural gas and wind turbines, and he's just always doing something. And it was.
Mine like a steel trap. He would carry on conversation. He'd say, "Where are you from?" And somebody said, "Well, I'm from Paul's Valley." And they go, "Oh, you know that little gas station right there on 32nd and 12th? Do you think that is Fred still there?" I mean, he was bringing up names and dates for everywhere, everybody, every time.
Yeah.
And Vern said he made them all up. I don't know.
You know, I think
Just pulling them out.
He was good.
Oh, he was so good.
But his right-hand person is Sally Godmuller, also Jay Rosser. And Sally, one time, Sally called and said, "Mr. Pickens wants to talk to you." And I thought, oh, gosh, that doesn't sound good. And he gets on the phone, "No, how you doing? How's Ann? How's the weather? How's it?" Sally says, "I'm paying out-of-state tuition for these kids that are going to OSU." And I said, "Well, yeah, they're out of state, Boone. The ranch is in Texas."
Yeah.
He said, "I knew that." But he said, "How much money do I have to give to get in-state tuition?" And I said, "Well, you haven't given any money for in-state for scholarships. I mean, you gave money for, the endowed chairs, you gave money for the stadium, you gave money for the geology department, but you didn't give anything." And just click. It's hung up on me.
So good.
He would, people thought he ran the university. He would certainly tell me what he thought we ought to do.
Big picture.
Yeah.
He never got in the weeds.
No. But there's one time he really got in the weeds, and that was we had a geology professor who wrote an article, scholarly article about the cause of earthquakes in Oklahoma, which was he thought it was the saltwater disposal wells, that we were putting too much water down. And Boone said, "You got to get rid of that guy. I mean, that's outrageous." And I said, "Boone, it doesn't work that way. I mean, it's you can't fire somebody for what they think." And right, and then I think he hung up then too. so he would get mad at me about whatever. I don't think he got mad at me as much as he just
his opinion.
Yeah, but he didn't always get his way. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, the time that you were there, I mean, there's so much happened, and just athletically, non-athletically. I mean, there's so many things that, and I remember you guys made an appearance last year, right, at the stadium. You had something going on. I think you made an appearance, and I remember
we were the grand marshals.
That's right. For the homecoming,
yes.
Yeah, and just kind of seeing that, and I'm sure it'd be great to come back and be in the stadium and around that. But outside of all the kind of glitz and the glamour of First Lady and President and being in the middle of the field and stuff, what's some of the things that you just loved that people probably think, well, why would you like that? You guys got to do a lot of cool stuff, but is there anything that you really miss from being First Lady and President of a university?
Miss the kids.
Very much.
Really?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Being around those kids.
Yeah.
I had spent 40 years, you'll have to do the math for me, and in a tall building downtown. I was just never around kids like that age. And the energy that they've got, and the wonderment and the excitement of, it's just it's a wonderful time of life for those kids, and to be around it. I had one university president tell me, if you ever get frustrated, just wait till the change of class and get out and just walk around, and you'll come back invigorated. Yeah. And it's really true. We're still involved. I'm chairing our leadership program. Josh Taylor actually runs it, and of course, pet therapy program continues to be unique and effective.
Huge. So we are going to celebrate 10 years this coming year. So we started in 2013. It is. So it goes along with America's Healthiest Campus because we're trying to address some of the emotional needs of our students.
Yeah.
So you get the whole gamut there again. You get the students who are squealing, so excited to see a dog. They miss their dog. And
that's one of the things I missed when I first came to university was being around dogs.
So you understand that.
Oh, I get it, yeah. Uh-huh.
And we are everywhere on campus. We're in the library, in the student union. Yeah. We're on special calls. People can call. We've had a professor call and say, I'm going to give a pop quiz. I need a dog. So we have therapy dogs for that. So it's every orientation, new student orientations, every visit. We have dogs all over campus. So anyway, it's a tremendous.
And the dogs are. It's usually, I think the lawyers say don't do that because the dog could bite somebody. And
right.
But these dogs and their owner handlers are trained.
Yeah.
I mean,
they're nationally certified through 2 different organizations. So it's pretty serious. It's a serious job. It's a lot of fun.
Who doesn't love dogs? Right? I mean, who doesn't love?
Well, it's funny. There are
people, right?
Yeah.
I'm a dog person. I've never been a cat person. If you're listening and you're a cat person, I get it. I think
we're cat people.
Both. Yeah, but
that reminds me about my sensitive wife or empathetic wife who, after the baboon episode, gave me a coffee cup with the baboon handle.
Back to the humor side of me, right? Back to humor things. Yeah, that 10 years that's really cool.
10 years and nationally recognized. We've spoken all over that, and it lets the students grow too, because we also have a student organization that volunteers with the pet therapy program. And there again, my favorite story on a particular student named Ashley. When she came to OSU, she was so shy she couldn't make eye contact. She connected with one particular dog, and then she would come back to see, because you can look up on social media and see where the dogs are when. And so she followed Charlie, and she made Charlie a little bow tie, and it grew and grew to the point when she was a junior, she flew with us for her first time to ever be on an airplane. She flew with us to a national conference and spoke at the conference. So she has blossomed beyond belief. So just to watch those stories happen through the dogs is so remarkable.
And our dog, Scruff, I guess flunked his first test.
Certificate. He barked at the trainer.
Scruff was
shot.
He had been shot. He was a stray, and somebody shot him, and probably was getting in garbage or whatever. And the girls took him to the vet school, and the vet school said that they could fix it, but it would be very expensive, and he may not use it. He's been without it so long. Yeah. And so the girls put Scruff's face on Facebook,
which was fairly new at the time.
Yeah, right. And told the story and what he needed, and they raised over $6,000.
Oh my gosh.
I thought to myself, what a great scam. I mean, just find a cute dog
that's in need.
Some scurrilous character could just make a story up. Anyway, they did fix it, and I guess that's when we were kind of dating with Scruff. We were really
well, we were just starting our pilot program. The vet school called me and said, we have a great dog for the program. He would be a great therapy dog. He lets us do anything to him. And I said, well, that's great. Good. Thanks. And the next thing I knew, we were sharing the dog like 2 hours on Sunday. The vet school would have him for 2 weeks. The students would have him for 3 days. I didn't know who the dog was, but it was when the vet school called me and said, we think we're going to have to amputate this leg. And I said, well, he's not even my dog. I mean, don't ask my permission. He's not even mine. But Anyway, somehow he became our dog. In spite of, I didn't know it.
But
'cause
he
we
wouldn't
were
use the leg. I mean, he would just kind of flop it over, and it was just
in the way.
in the way.
Yeah.
And so they were going to take the leg off. He'd be fine as a three-legged dog.
Yeah.
And a vet, what Sip's real name, had studied acupuncture in China.
Yeah.
And they tried acupuncture and doing the treadmill underwater, and he runs like a rocket ship.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people just said, yeah, that's fine, like, let's pay for it. Like, if he needs it, you trust and it's not that the doctor didn't know what they were doing, but that's just what they would have done.
Yeah.
Of course.
And now,
because the trick is trying to reconnect the nerves with the brain. And it worked.
That's fascinating.
And he's a superstar. So this year he was just inducted into the Oklahoma Animal Hall of Fame. Did you know there was such
I had no idea. Now I need to look that up.
He was totally speechless. I had no idea either, but he's representing the program.
And we were out of town, and our kids took him to the event.
Yeah.
And he
was speechless again. Yeah. He didn't even bark. Thank goodness. Yeah.
Just very like, why am I here? What is going on? Somebody feed me a treat. Finishing up then, last question, because I know you guys are going to get ready to leave town. If you could snap your fingers and have one thing happen at OSU, I mean, dream, or what would that be? Would it be Garth coming home and playing? Would it be national championship? Would it be academically? Kind of what would be your, if we could have just one wish?
Wow, I'd wish that it had the resources to be as good as it could be. It just has to manage inadequate resources, and so that would be it. I'd also wish that it has good leaders, which I think Casey Strom is. So that's good.
That's a very political answer. If you
told you I've been around politics.
But we do feel that way.
Yeah. What about you, Anne? Does anything come to mind? You don't have to give a political answer if you don't want to.
No, I mean, we love so much about OSU. I guess I would just hope for complete recognition of the value the school has for so many individuals. Yeah, I mean, it's in every area, right? In every area.
I follow the golf side, and very, very, very good, very accomplished women's and men's golf team.
Sure.
But, it's been great to see. I mean, cross country, baseball, basketball, football. And that obviously that's probably what a lot of people see most of is the athletics. But from the academic side, there is so much more going on.
Yeah,
as well.
And we also, excuse me for interrupting, but we never got into the art side because through the arts we have tapped into another audience of people who are not athletically inclined, but they are into performing arts. So we have, through the McKnight Center for the Performing Arts, we have been able to gather a whole new group of supporters coming to campus.
Yeah, that probably people say what's your proudest accomplishment? And sometimes I say I caused us to put a sprinkler system in. We did not have a sprinkler system, and that
was your first accomplishment.
That was my first accomplishment. And probably, in terms of a moment in time, it was October 11th, I think, of 2019 when we opened the McKnight Center with the New York Philharmonic. And I mean, I didn't have a dry eye. It was just so momentous. I just couldn't believe that little Stillwater, America, has the New York Philharmonic. And how we got it is a whole other story. Yeah. But
connections.
It just puts you on the map.
Yeah, my parents came to town a couple of years ago, 2019 homecoming. We had tickets. I've never been to a football game before in their entire life. My brother,
they had not.
They had never been to a football game, and I took my brother and my dad to homecoming. And we played Baylor in 2019. Had great tickets, and my brother, who is 5 years younger than me, couldn't get over the fact that there was, 100,000 people to watch 21-year-old or 20-year-old kids run around football, and their favorite thing was the fact when Bullet ran out, they couldn't believe it. They're like, here comes Bullet. I got so many videos of that.
That's
but I've had some
great.
amazing experiences at Stillwater with family because of that. Because of football and even golf now as well. So,
we took our grandkids over to ride Bullet.
Yeah.
But Bullet doesn't live. He has a very nocturnal existence,
right?
Because if he is in the sun too much, he fades.
Yeah.
And but he came out that day, and of course, what he said, stadium. But we had a new Bullet, and it was it confetti that was on the field?
Yes,
or something?
yes.
Made just nervous and crazy.
Right.
And I've seen that one other time downtown. It was we had the Olympic festival, and they had horses coming through, and there's all this confetti on the. They don't want any part of that.
Yeah, I had Elise Wade on the podcast. She rode Bullet, I think, up until 19 or 20, and she said this. She said there was first time I think she rode out. He didn't want to go back.
That may have been the time we saw it.
Yeah, she said that he was also scared of Bucky and Joe. From Eskimo Joe's, I think is what she said. I think that's right how they say their names. Yeah. But she was like,
with Pistol Pete.
Yeah, great, but couldn't face the bunny or whatever.
Scruff didn't like Pistol Pete.
Yeah.
So going back to 2019 homecoming, I think Ricky Fowler was the homecoming.
Probably, yeah.
And so we had a chance to be in the parade. There's a lot of standing around dead times. So we had a chance to be with Ricky and his wife, fiance at the time, Allison. And I said, Ricky, do you remember taking yoga when you were at OSU? Because he was only there 1 year.
Yeah.
He said, oh, yeah. He said, he turned to Allison. He said, I've been saying I need to get back into it, haven't I? I mean, he said he loved it. And Mike McGraw, who was the golf coach at the time, had his golf team come in. I was teaching them yoga. And I said, do you know who your instructor was? He says, no, I haven't the faintest idea. So it just shows you, freshmen in college could give a rip as to what. They're just told to do something, they do it. But
that's brilliant.
My claim is I taught Ricky Fowler yoga, but he doesn't know it.
Doesn't know it. No. Oh, and there's so many experiences like that of all the alumni that come back, right? And whether, like I said, whether it's athletics or not athletics, you have such a great relationship, through the university to people, whether it's traveling through Dubai and you get and go pokes out of nowhere, or or walking through town. It's fascinating. But thank you so much for your time. We've spent an hour and 30 minutes chatting and telling stories, so I really appreciate it.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you,
it's
Mike,
been awesome.
and go Pokes.
Yes, go Pokes.
Yeah.
For everyone listening, we will catch you next episode. Cheers.
Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. Our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.